Thank you, Mel, so much for joining us today and bringing your journey to our class. I first met Mel when we worked together at Virginia Commonwealth University in the filmmaking or the photography and filmmaking department, which I think is really an interesting thing where they're both sort of presented next to each other.
Mhm.
And I think like you could be like the poster child for the department in that you started with photo and then shifted over to filmmaking. So, anyways, yeah, I just wanted you to share your journey, and I'm a huge fan of following your career from afar. Yeah, I'll just turn it over to you then.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny you say we worked together at VCU, but really Dana was my professor in like my first film class. So
Yo, yeah, 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 yeah. We worked together.
yeah, technically. Yeah. So I started off at Virginia Commonwealth University as a still photography major, and I originally went to school thinking that I wanted to do photojournalism. And I did a lot of photojournalism in college and was like taking journalism classes and all of this stuff. But the photo program there is very much like fine art photography, sort of setting you up for like gallery showings and photo books and that type of thing, not as much like practical application. And I think maybe like halfway through the program, I was like, not really like I like enjoyed the photo aspect of it, but like photography is like very solitary, I think, in like how do you conceive ideas and make stuff and all of this. It was very much like this. And I was always, even within my work at school, wanting to do stuff like that, incorporate like a lot of different people being involved in it, which I think kind of like naturally led me to do more filmmaking stuff. And so taking Dana's class was definitely like a big uh I think starting point for me because I took it with like a bunch of other film majors. Like normally I think the photo kids kind of take it all together, but I for some reason took it like a different year or like a different semester. So I met like a really good group of other students that I got along with and like wanted to work with and stuff in like a way that I didn't really resonate with a lot of the photo like classmates. And then I guess I started like working in it because my junior year there was like a production company in Richmond that put up an ad on Craigslist that they needed people to help with art department stuff for like a freebie short film like promo thing. Um and I was bored, so I emailed them and worked on this. So they were like building sets and doing things like that for this like what it really was is like a teaser for a feature film that they wanted to make, which is like a thing that people kind of do as like a proof of concept or like to show like potential investors like this is what this movie could be if you give me enough money to shoot it. Um, so I started helping off with that, and then I did like blood of like effects makeup and stuff when I was in high school for theater, and they like needed somebody to do that for this free job. And so I was like, oh, I can do that, which was cool because getting to do that makeup stuff meant I got to be like on set with everybody. Whereas like the art department's like, I mean, even in bigger productions, like a lot of times it's like the art department like comes in and does all the stuff. And then there's like one representative or two representatives that stay behind. But for the most part, you work before the shooting crew gets there because like then the whole set is set up. So I came in and did all this um the makeup on it and I kept asking everybody on set like what their regular job was because I'm from Virginia and I didn't know that like people made films anywhere other than LA. I also didn't know like what a job in filmmaking looked like. That wasn't like I'm a auteur filmmaker who just like stays in my house. I didn't know like what the crew side of it was. And so I met a lot of people through that who were like, this is my real job. Like this is what I do for a living. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was like a job, really. Um, and so then through that, I started working with that production company. They would call me for all of their low budget and free jobs to be a makeup artist, sometimes hair, makeup, and wardrobe, which meant that I was in charge of like the first like paying gig I got in the film industry. I was a wardrobe assistant on like a bank commercial. And basically my job was to like iron men's shirts all the
Oh,
time.
wow.
Like all the time, like for the commercial for them to like wear on screen.
Yeah.
But I didn't like know anything about that. I was like thinking about it every time my mom, like my whole life, had been like trying to show me how to properly iron a shirt. I'm like, get out of here, mom. I'm never gonna fucking do that. And that, so I like watched a YouTube video on how to iron a men's shirt and kind of like got through it. But I did like a number of these jobs as like a makeup person, which is like I truly don't know anything about. I mean, blood makeup is like not, it's a very different thing
Yeah,
than
like a Halloween monster stuff versus,
yes,
yeah.
it's very different. And like to be fair, I don't know if I even really knew how to do that well. I like taught myself how to do it in high school. It's not like I was like at any kind of like proficiency. So so like yeah, I did that for I don't know, 6 months or something. And then the production company I was working with, like finally one day I was like, hey, just so you know, like I actually like don't know anything about this, but I do know a lot of stuff about cameras. Because I was always like kind of trying to talk to the camera people and the camera assistants about like what they were using and all the gear. And so they started having me then help out with um some of their camera things. And then then I graduated and I was kind of like not entirely sure what I was going to do. I was photo assisting in Richmond a little bit and doing some small things. And then this TV pilot came to Richmond to shoot, which like I guess there's some more stuff now, but especially then it was like pretty much everything that shot in Richmond was like a Civil War period piece, which this also was. It was called Point of Honor and it didn't get picked up. It was like back when Amazon did this thing where they like made like six pilots and then like people would vote on which one they wanted to get made into a show. And so this was one of those, but it did not get picked. Which is fine because I don't think it should have. But I got hired as an office PA. Somebody called me because I interned at the Virginia Film Office, which is like the government agency that helps deal with like tax incentives for film productions to shoot in Virginia and like incentivizes people to come there and deals with like permits and stuff like that. So I interned with them when I was in college, which was one of the most boring things I've ever done in my life. And I had a moment where I like, if you had asked me before that job if I thought I could work in an office for the rest of my life, I probably would have just been like, yeah, why not? And then I did that internship where I was there for like 3 hours a day, 2 days a week. And I was like, this is like, I would be like physically ill. But I guess they liked me enough that they called me because this production came to town and they needed an office PA to like start the production office before shooting happens. And basically Richmond kind of has like enough crew for like one and a half like big shows. And so there was already something filming. So all the people who like normally do this were like on another job. So they called me and like I it was really fun because nobody else was available. So like we needed a bunch of PAs to like help set up the office. PA is a production assistant, which depending on like if it's what you're talking about can mean a lot of things. But in this capacity, you're like helping set up the office and do a lot of like clerical like work and runs and all kinds of things. And so I was able to like basically just like hire all my friends to like come do these jobs, including Dana came and got to like do some of that for a little bit, which was cool. And yeah, like um a couple weeks. So this all happens like a month before like the crew shows up to start filming because we're dealing with all the pre stuff. And I got the crew list with all the camera people's information on it, and I basically just like cold emailed them and asked if I could be their camera PA, meaning like I'm the production assistant that's like designated to the camera department to like train under them. Um, and
Is that like potentially shady because you're using your access as like you got hired to do this thing and then that gave you access to
it
the.
wasn't really shady, like I couldn't reach out to them, but like I definitely like had to get it cleared with like the production manager who was like the woman that ran the office because like if I left to do she basically had to allow me to like leave my position at the office to go do that
That
because I
makes
was like
sense, yeah.
leaving her one person short and she was like really scary. Um Super mean like chain smoking lady who drank like 27 Diet Cokes a day and stuff and so I was like really nervous. But she let me do it and I got to be the camera PA, which was like the first time I'd been on a film set like that. It was the first time I'd seen any of that gear. Like I'd been on all these like little jobs in Richmond, like small commercials and small this, but that was the first time I saw like a proper film set with like a full team of people and saw how it ran and all of that. And
Because
yeah,
this was the parent production company was ABC, if I remember correctly.
yeah, it was ABC
So
and it
yeah,
was directed by Randall Wallace, who's like the guy that directed Braveheart and like pretty much nothing else after that. He was like a total dork, honestly. Like, and like not, I don't know. He was like the lamest like guy making a really boring period piece I've ever seen. But
but that's a
uh
wild jump then to go from like you were doing Halloween makeup basically, and then that
yeah,
kind of stretched to like, normal makeup for like very small productions locally
right.
to suddenly like on set for an ABC production.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that being in Richmond helped with that because like they just kind of like don't have that many options. So being the camera PA, like when I called, it was like, "Can I be your camera PA?" They're like, whatever, sure. Which now I understand being in that position because if I was going somewhere where I didn't know anybody, it's not like I have anyone to call to be my camera PA. They're not going to fly somebody in to be your camera PA. So you just have to get lucky enough that like you have somebody who, and I think a lot of times in that role, at least where I'm at now, if I have to hire somebody like that, it's like way less about like I don't actually need them to know anything, but I need them to be like self-motivated and like interested in what they're doing and like try. So I think somebody calling me would at least give me an indication that this person had like a vague drive to like participate in the production.
That's
Uh,
actually super encouraging to hear. Yeah, because like normally
yeah.
people are like, yeah, don't reach out, but this is like absolutely reach out, show initiative, and
Yeah. Somebody said when there's a photographer that I used to assist in Richmond, and he used the words like politely persistent one time about like keeping up with people, which I think I still, even to this day, because I work freelance and everybody I know works freelance, it's like, and you get on a job where you're busy for 3 months and then suddenly you're available again. And so you're constantly having to like reach out to people and kind of like remind them about you or like check in and like keep up with them and stuff. And it's like finding a way to do that that's like feels natural and not bothersome. And I mean, I think it gets easier the longer you're in it because I have now like actual relationships with these people. So me texting them to see what they're doing is not like weird because we have known each other. But yeah, it's
I like that
definitely
politely persistent. I wrote it down.
politely persistent. Yeah.
Before
Uh,
we excuse me, before we switch over to your Hollywood career, we were talking just before we started the meeting about like some of your early photo work that you were
oh
doing in
yeah,
undergrad. Do you want to share that for us so we can kind of see like
sure.
I realized too that it seems like a lot of your work as photo did have kind of like more involved props or lighting. It just felt cinematic. And
Yeah,
still photos can obviously feel cinematic. They probably should. Um, but did you feel it like as you were going, like, hey, I'm actually
I
influenced by movies. I wonder if I should.
I definitely did. Like I think that I'll pull something up in a second, but yeah, because especially at that time, like I mean, I think Dana could probably speak on this more than me, but I feel like art schools are very like trendy, if that makes sense. Like there's a thing that's like kind of like hot right now in how people shoot photos. And so like at our school there was like this a bunch of photographers that were kind of like everybody thought were like super awesome and everybody was like making work like those photographers and a lot of our professors made work like those photographers and so it was like all in this thing and a lot of what that was at the time was this kind of like deadpan, like unobtrusive thing, like a lot of like wide shots of like a house in the middle of a field and like a piece of paper on the ground and like you're kind of like putting, it's like very like I don't know, maybe Dana's like could do a better job explaining it. Does that
No,
make
this
sense?
is
Like,
this
I think
is
about like
epic. A wide shot of a house in the field with a piece of paper on the ground. That does sound like art photo.
like I think that like Alex Soth is like the first person that comes to mind when I think about people like who was really excited, like the type of photography that people in that program were really excited about. And like I like Alex Soth as a photographer, but it just like wasn't my style. It's like very like it's not constructed at all. It's very like I found this thing, I did not put it together. I'm using available light. like I'm like a far away observer of the thing that I'm or the things that I'm photographing in the story that I'm telling, I think
Yeah.
is like very much like not, yeah, being in like having your hand in it, I think was like a way that people described it. And so I really liked kind of the opposite of that, which was like controlling every element of the photograph. And it was very frustrating to me because I mean, I think that art is just, it's just subjective. And so it was like weird getting like feedback on something that's like people not necessarily critiquing like the work, but critiquing like the type of thing I was making because it didn't really like align with like a lot of stuff that other people were making. And like, yeah, I think that that kind of like pushed me away from photography because I like wasn't really getting much like positive feedback. But like this, can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like this series is like a good example. Could not tell you, maybe it was location photography, which is just like using available light and like bounces and like outside stuff versus like studio photography. Now I'm like, what was that class?
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of these assignments, there's kind of like no directive other than like the tools you have to use to make it. And so I made like this series of people wearing this like kind of funny um like steampunk stuff. I would like go to thrift stores and like buy all the costumes and like went out to my friend's like farm to shoot this and all of this. And so like when all of these were put up on the, it must have not, yeah, up on for display, like it's very much like stills from a movie is like how it was described. And I don't know if I like really like intended to do that from the beginning, but it was like kind of what it ended up being was like all of these movie stills. Um,
These are awesome.
yeah, it's really funny.
This wasn't received well in class?
I don't know. Everybody's just like, it was like, I think that everybody just like kind of like figured out what I was doing. They're like, oh, we get it. It's like a weird sci-fi thing, or like, I don't know. There wasn't like enough like depth to it, you know, like
Mm.
you'd have to show a picture and then be like, the reason this is important is because my grandfather from 1876 wrote on that piece of paper and it's on a field that somebody that died on like 2 years before. You know, it's like that was like the type of photography that people were interested in. It was like you needed like a 3-page artist statement in order to understand what it was about to make it interesting. And I just like really, I don't know.
You
I
just
think I
wanted
have
to craft a narrative laden image.
yeah, and I kind of
Yeah.
like also got in this mindset where like to me, and I people will disagree about this, but like the first point of art or like a photo or what I'm doing is that like I want it to like look cool.
It has to be
And I
aesthetic.
also yeah, and I think that like all of these other things are important. Like I understand the importance of there being like meaning and symbolism and all of these things in artwork that like makes it more interesting and like have more like going on in it. But I think that sometimes, especially like with my classmates, I'd be like, but I don't like want to look at this photograph. Or like this one girl in our program just like straight up didn't know how to use a camera. So all our photos were like they just like weren't exposed correctly. And then people were like, oh, but this story is really interesting. I'm like, the first thing that you have to do is like take a photograph. So all of this stuff doesn't matter if you can't like take a photograph. So I'm like technically trying to like learn how to achieve these things. And yeah, I got a lot of criticism for it like being too like addy, which is
Oh,
really funny to think about
that's
coming from like an
interesting.
art school because it's like realistically, like how many people are going to go to art school and then make a living by like selling their photos as a working artist to a gallery or something. You know what I mean? Like being
Yeah.
like, oh, these look like you could use them in advertising and you want to pursue a career being an advertising photographer is like such a like more kind of like realistic application of like the tools that you learn in school. And so I think I also kind of really resented that because I was like, well, what do you want from me? Like I don't know, like this is like how people communicate in the real world or like get a lot of
Oh,
money
hey,
like
there's some of that. Yeah.
this is from a blog post that I had to do. I'm gonna haphazardly scroll through these. My poor roommates and like friends were just like subjected to being in
So you
So
just
many,
constantly roped in the people around you at
everybody.
this point, right?
Yeah. My poor friend, this is my friend Nick, who was like he was the one that was like in the stupid cage in the last ones I showed you. I, yeah.
Well, there's something amazing in that, like you still have to be, like a good enough or a nice enough person to be able to consistently like rope in friends and like not lose that resource.
Oh, yeah. That's a really funny. Oh, here's a good one. Have
Epic.
some
Lordy.
sort of cannibalism project or something. Here's Nick getting hunted by some people again. This poor guy. But yeah, I think that honestly, like if you talk about like things you learn in college, and I think that this is also probably like applicable like to this class, which is like people who are not photography or art majors. It's like it's funny because Dana always like whatever talks about it when I speak to his classes, which is like, oh, you're gonna come in here and tell people that they don't need to go to college to like be in the film industry, which is like totally true. You don't, like there's like when I tell you more about like my actual job, like there's not a lot in that I learned in college, but like skills like me doing these photo shoots and being able to like coordinate a group of people to work with this and communicate with them and like get people to do things with me and make them feel like valued and supported enough that they want to continue to do these dumb, free, obnoxious projects. Like things like that, like those are incredibly valuable skills that apply to everything. And it doesn't matter if I win to photography or this. And I don't know, like, I think that in college you can kind of like explore that like a little bit less risky because you're not going to get fired or something.
Nice. I'm gonna drop this on you very last second, but I was a huge fan of your landscape photos from your Iceland trip.
Oh
Are those
yeah,
difficult to find? Is that
here's
insane?
one.
Oh, here's
Yeah,
some right
so
there.
these are let me look at this one. These are composite photos, meaning I took like a bunch of different photos that I had and like put them in Photoshop to like make them into like new landscapes and places. And it's funny they like actually came out of this is like the one thing that I think came out of having this like annoying critique where everybody was um like didn't like this style of thing. I got a lot of criticism when I was in school for only having white men in my photographs too, which it's like now being older and wiser, I like understand, but at the time I was like, I don't know, these are just who all my friends are. Like I don't have a lot of like older like black women in my circle to ask to be in this photo. Like it's truly like a thing of availability and then everybody was always trying to get me to like push like the like race and age and like gender of people that were in my photographs, which I don't think is necessarily bad, but I think I also just had it in my head that like that's not what it was about. Like the images to me like weren't about that. And so like to me, like the person in it was just like this default person who happened to be the people around me. And I kind of got so frustrated with the fact that I couldn't really verbalize that. I didn't really know what to do about it. I felt like ingenuine to go out and like cast people based on the way that they look to be in my photos because I didn't understand that. And so my rebellion essentially was like, all right, fine, I'm putting up photos that don't have any people in them. So I like made these composite landscapes that I think ended up being like really cool actually. And yeah. So I guess that's like a good example of like why having critique like that is good, even though I
Yeah,
thought it was frustrating. Like if people had just been like, this is great all the time, I would have never really thought about it.
yeah,
Um, I would have just been like, well, what's the big deal? It's like all white men in my photos. Like those are who's around me. And I think it's also like anything in art. I don't think anything about it's like good or bad, but it's like you should be aware of like what it is and that like something is being said with that and you can decide if that's what you want to be being said or not being said. Like I think I don't know who said this exactly, or maybe it's just like a thing that people say all the time, but like the idea of like art is like there's no like good or bad art. It's like, is it successful? like is it do people see it and like feel or think or understand the thing that you're trying to convey to them? And that I think is something also that's maybe like a thought or an idea that I have carried after school a lot. Um, Especially now, like in talking to Kelly, who's my partner now, because he didn't go to college, he doesn't know anything about art, anything like that. He didn't grow up with like any kind of education about those things. And I think that he, like a lot of people, kind of approaches art in the way that's like, oh, I don't understand art, so I'm not like allowed to have a thought about it or an opinion. And I've anytime, but he's not like not interested in it. He just like doesn't have any reference. And so I feel like when we've gone to a museum or seen a show or like a movie or anything, like I'm always trying to reiterate that like you're an audience, and so like your opinion, no matter what it is like a valid interpretation of this. Like when someone's like, oh, you didn't like get it, it's like, okay, well then maybe the person didn't explain it well enough.
Yeah,
That's how I feel about it. Or like if
yeah.
this movie is so abstract that you have to have like a PhD in philosophy in order to understand it, and it's like, I don't know, then I guess that movie was only made for like 100 people, and the rest of us, aren't going to understand it. Um, so yeah, which I think we probably talk about with movies now more than anything because we watch a lot of like mainstream movies, but also a lot of kind of like quirkier artsy films, and yeah, and I think that yeah, I don't know. It's just like you don't have to have a degree in art to like have an opinion on it. You're allowed to have an opinion on it. You're a person viewing it, and
Yeah.
if it's so above your head and these people are too smart, then honestly they're just like not that good at conveying what they're trying to say. Like that's how, like or it's like intentionally limiting. They're going to make something that's like intentionally too difficult to understand if you don't have this knowledge, which is also like your choice as an artist, but I don't know.
Right.
That's like a whole maybe other conversation. But I think for like a non-majors class, it's like a good thing to remember that like you don't have to, I don't know. Like art is a subjective thing. And so you're like allowed to feel however you feel about it. You're allowed to look at something that other people think is bad art and think it's good. Like I'll
Yeah.
see a photo. Like it's funny too. Like I'll get a roll of film developed now that's like really overexposed, or like especially from this trip when I just went to see Dana. Like I bought a new camera right before then, and like the first 5 rolls of film are like garbage because I didn't like understand how to use it. So a bunch of them were really overexposed. They're out of focus, so they like kind of weird. And like I got it back, and I was like, ugh, annoying. And Kelly's response was like, "Oh, those look so cool." Like the what a weird thing, or like I like that it like looks strange, and I'm like, yeah, I mean that's not what I was trying to do, so I'm frustrated by it, but you looking at it having no reference, it's just like that's a cool image. And so yeah,
I
anyway.
like it, it definitely ties in. I like Matt what you said about your favorite movie being Revenge of the Sith and being worried that that was like potentially a controversial take. But like,
Yeah,
that's your favorite movie. That's your favorite movie. Like that's awesome. Yeah.
totally. I mean, and there's also like I think that just in general, like with culture, there's like a thing that like if something's popular, then it's like it's not allowed to be your favorite thing. But I've kind of always been of the opinion that like things are popular for a reason. Like there's a reason that people like this stuff. Like there's a like I don't know, there's a reason that like yeah, I don't know, pop songs are catchy and everybody likes them. It's like that doesn't make you like not cool for I don't know, for liking something that is intentionally made for lots of people to like. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like the point. Yeah.
It's like being mad at someone for liking ice cream or something.
Yeah, it's like, oh, ice cream, really? Like, I only like, yeah, some made
Brussels
up
sprouts. Yeah.
Brussels sprout toasted walnuts. I don't know.
Anyways, I got us off on a tangent. So thank you for showing this photo work, and that's
For
awesome. And
sure.
it's really interesting to understand its like context in your schooling and how you kind of felt like you were not getting worthwhile critique because people just didn't like the style and they couldn't engage with it. And that
Right.
kind
They
of
wanted me to be very hands off, I think is what it came down to. They wanted me to like not construct the image so much and let things be. And I think in like having that much discussion about it, I realized how much like that was an important aspect of making work for me was being really involved in it. I didn't
yeah,
want to be just like passive, like
yeah,
standby, unless I was doing like photojournalism, which to me is like a totally different thing because that's
right.
like involved in that's the whole point is to be like this standby. But if I'm making like work for like a gallery or like a photo book in that way. I don't know. It just felt like something I want to do.
Yeah. All right. So you got this crazy opportunity with Point of Honor coming to town, and you ended up on a ABC shoot, and you ended up on set next to
Yes.
like actual Hollywood level industry folks and equipment and all that stuff. That was
Yes.
still in Richmond, Virginia. At
Still
what
in
point
Richmond,
did
Virginia.
and at what point did you think like, hey, actually this is awesome. I want to work in the movies and I might want to move away from Richmond, Virginia.
I think I maybe had that thought a little bit before that came up because I was like starting to work on bigger stuff in Richmond, but there's kind of like there's a small crew in Richmond and the it's like people don't want to teach you so much that you take their job is kind of like what it comes down to. So I was finding myself like at this place where I was like kind of ready to like not be a PA anymore, but nobody really wanted to give me the opportunity to be like to be a camera assistant because there were like already enough camera assistants and there wasn't room for more. And so I kind of knew that like I was gonna have to move. I didn't know like where or what. I was like honestly like really kind of lost. I like went from being in college where I was like in charge. I was like the editor of the newspaper and I was like in a ton of classes and I did all these projects all the time and I had another job at a restaurant and I was like non-stop. I was like work, this, school. I was super involved and then it's like I graduated and suddenly I was working as a dishwasher at a restaurant and like that was it. And I was like, what is like that's it. That's and I guess I was like photo assisting a little bit too, but that was like kind of inconsistent. And so that was like the 2 years right or the first year like right after college was definitely like very difficult in trying to like figure out like I mean I think that probably happens to a lot of people after undergrad like you've spent your whole life in school where you've always had like a set schedule and a set like a list of things that you're gonna do and like someone's giving you the prompt of like the things you have to achieve and suddenly it's like well you can just do whatever you want now and even if that's just being a dishwasher and you're like oh it's kind of scary. Um,
Yeah, totally.
so I knew that I was like gonna wanna move eventually. I kind of always assumed I would move to New York because my family's all from like New Jersey. My sister lived in New York. I spent a lot of time there and really liked it. I didn't like have a reason to move there or know anybody there. I mean, I had friends there and stuff, but like in the film industry at the time. But the crew that came to do this pilot were all from LA. And basically like the pilot ended and they were like, "Hey, if you move to LA, we'll hire you." And I was like,
Dang.
maybe, I don't know. And then I remember I did a commercial with our friend Rich, who is he was like a boom op sound guy in Richmond. And I did this like, I don't remember what it was for, some stupid breakfast cereal commercial or something that I was like a PA on after the pilot. I just like had one day of work and I was eating lunch with him and I was like, oh, these people invited me and I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And he was a little bit older. He was probably like 10 or 15. I don't know. So he was like 10 years older than me and been in the industry for a while. And he was just like so casually was like, you should move. He's like, you're not going to regret it. And like that, honestly, it sounds so stupid. Like that's all it took. I just needed someone to be like, that's what you have to do. Like someone to like give me permission to just do it. And I was super fortunate. Like two of the assistants on that job, they hired me a couple times. There was like another pilot in LA where um I flew myself out and basically like stayed at one of the assistants' house, like on his couch, and he had me work on that project. And then when I did move here um permanently, which was like 9 months later, one of those assistants had like she needed a roommate, so I moved in with her and like that was definitely helpful because I think moving here knowing nothing is really hard. Now, granted, those were like the only two people I knew, and I went from like living in Richmond where I knew like 100 people and I couldn't like walk down the street without running into someone I knew to like now living in a city where I basically knew it was definitely difficult, like socially. Um, but I don't know. You figure it out.
We, yeah, we're like getting a little bit tight on time.
Oh, okay.
Maybe like another 10 minutes before we, save some time for questions or anything.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, so you got out there and it's kind of wild. I feel like I know a lot of people who just blindly move out there, but you ended up with a roommate before you moved, and you had like
Yeah.
at least a couple of job connections. That's really interesting in the industry that you wanted to go into.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if I'll be honest too, like I mean, I think I like it now because I've lived here, but especially when I first moved here and first visit, like I was like, I don't like Los Angeles. I was like, it's a fucking weird place. I don't get it. I'm like from the East Coast. I don't really care for it being sunny all the time or like the heat. And so like I was like very like, what am I doing here? Like I don't this is not like a place I would live for any other reason. Um, but yeah, I was pretty lucky with those two. And it's funny too because one of them isn't even in the industry anymore, and the other guy, this guy Josh, who was really like the most helpful to me, like I never work with anymore. I see him like periodically, but they're not even like really the tightest people to me now, but they were definitely pretty, it's kind of like all it takes. They introduced me or had me work with a couple. I'll just tell this and then I can move on to these other photos. But like basically I'd moved here, and I was like help they anytime someone had like a low budget or a free thing, they would like send them my number. So I would go do those. And I remember I got hired on a like a big commercial, like Samsung commercial or something, because somebody told somebody else in like a Facebook group that they need, like, that's just like how people get work. So I ended up on this job that I was like way underprepared for. It was like looking at it now, like the assistants that were on that job are some of like the biggest assistants in the industry. Um, and the DP was like a big feature deep, like, and people were asking me, like the assistants on it, because I got hired by somebody else, were like, how long have you, I'm like, said something about just moving here, and they're like, when did you move here? I'm like, 2 weeks ago. They're like, how did you get on this job? I'm like, I mean, again, I didn't really like, I was like the lowest person. I definitely like knew enough to do my job, but I'd never been on a job like that. And I remember we shot like a 19-hour day one day. And
oh
I was
wow.
supposed to help out with this like freebie short film the next day. And I was like this close to calling them and being like, I'm not coming in because I got like 3 hours of sleep. But for some reason I didn't. I like sucked it up and went. And I showed up and I was on camera. I was a second on it. I was paired with this guy who was my first AC, who's kind of like my partner. And I showed up and was like, hey, just so you know, like I'm like dead because I didn't sleep last night. And I, in my head, did a really bad job because I was like, I don't care about this and I'm not getting paid, so whatever. But I told him that I just moved here and blah blah blah. And then like 2 weeks later, he called me and was like, hey, we need a utility, which is sort of like the entry level position in the camera department for workaholics. Because he was
Wow.
like the main guy on that. And that was like the first like long-term job I got out here. And because of that, I met kind of like that kind of snowballed into like the crew and like the group of people that I worked with from there. But I do think about that a lot, and I tell those people who move out here, it's like you just like never know like what connection is gonna make it. Like I was this close to not going to that shoot, and like I don't think I like wouldn't have a career if I didn't go. I would have met somebody else. I would have done something different. But like I always try to tell people, it's like if you can do something, if you can like go to something for free or hang out or like be around, like if it's between that and like sitting in your house and doing nothing, like just go. You're never gonna like regret it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think people should get paid for their work and all those things, but also you can get paid in things that aren't money. I guess I also tell people,
Nice.
especially when you're starting off, like I don't necessarily need to do that now, but in the beginning, like those connections and the experience and stuff like that, like was really valuable. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, walk us through these images that we got.
Yeah, so Dana asked to pick out some recent, well, these are just like kind of like the most recent jobs. Wait, how do I
I think it's
mm,
upset that you have that movie file selected also.
oh, I'll show that last, I guess. So this I thought would be kind of
Nice.
fun.
There it is.
So everybody, maybe they don't know, on film sets, there's craft services, which is like snacks and all of those things, which are for the crew. And there's also like a medic that has whatever you need. You go there because you need vitamin C or because you need Tylenol or honestly because or if you get hurt, but they also usually have like electrolytes and like they're like the school nurse of the film set. And sometimes when you get on commercials, especially, I don't know why, just because like their budgets are bigger or something like that. There's like these people who have, so this is a job I did recently, and this was the medic's setup. So he's got
Wow.
like, these are all these like goji berry, like supplement things here, shots and like mouthwash, and he had like floss sticks for after work and like 5 hour energies and like earplugs and like gauze and like it's just whole it's just like all available. Vitamins and like
Wow.
I took a picture of it because I was like, this is kind of next level.
Yeah.
It's not
What is the human organ?
it says
What?
it says basic boo-boos on it.
Oh, so maybe a Band-Aid's in there?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's pretty good.
But it is
That's
pretty funny.
wild. So this is the medic's cart for the
Yeah, this isn't
production.
even this. Yeah, and he just show he gets paid whatever, and they probably pay him a rental for all this stuff, and he shows up with it. And like, I remember I did like a big commercial where it was like overnights, and the medic would like walk around with like a tray that had all those little cups, and in them were just like vitamin cocktails essentially for all these people like working long hours that had like B12 and like vitamin C and all this stuff. It's like,
Oh,
I don't know, it's pretty funny and like I don't know. I just thought people might enjoy that because it's a pretty like bizarre thing that exists.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Also just like craft service and catering in general, like craft service that's like a truck. It's funny, I had a friend who works in Chicago who described it as a mobile bodega, which is really
Nice.
it's just like a truck or whatever, and they have snacks and they have like but of like any kind and drinks of any kind, and they'll make you coffee drinks and like I don't know. It's all really just part of a scam to make you think that it's okay to work 14 hours a day. But it is like a really cool perk of the job that I think sometimes we take for granted because like Kelly, my boyfriend was talking to his who also works in the film industry. He's a boom operator, like a for sound. And his brother works as like a machinist for Boeing or something like that. And so he said something about something making lunch, and Kelly said like they don't have snacks at your work. And like his brother was like, "What are you talking about? Why would they have snacks? Like, what am I, a baby?" And we're like, "Oh, I don't know, like because we just get we get free snacks and whatever. Like if I had to bring my own snacks, it would be like such a we're yeah or
That's
like even
awesome.
parking signs. Like when I go to work, I get like an email that has like instructions as to where to go to park, and then there's like signs when you get there, these yellow signs with arrows that show you where to park, and there's somebody there being like, "This is where you park." And I did like kind of a low budget thing recently because it's been kind of slow, and like there weren't any signs and there were no people, and the number of people that like showed up late because they couldn't figure it out, and I was like, "Are we like dumb now?" Because I'm like, "How am I supposed to find this?" There's not like a flashing arrow over the parking lot being like park here. So I don't know. All right, we can go through these camera things. This is a Papa John's commercial that I worked on recently. I just think this photo is really funny for obvious reasons. But this is the type of
Yeah.
camera that we shoot on. This is a red, actually. I'd say that this is the only DP that I work with who shoots on red. Every other project I shoot on shoots on either a Sony camera or a Arri camera, but whatever, it's all kind of the same. We did all these like different inserts and stuff, like pieces of the pizza to put into the final commercial. And so this was one of them that I don't know. Some days at work, I'm just like, what are we doing with our lives?
For that one, was there someone kind of constantly minding the pizza to keep it looking
Yeah, yeah. So
sizzly
there's like a
or
food prep team that like that's all they do, and they like heat it up, or like there's hot plates too, where like this was probably us just framing up, but when we actually filmed it, sometimes there's like a hot plate underneath so that like it's bubbling and like steaming a little bit. A lot of times too, these are like not edible because they have like gloss on them, or in like the pizza, they help tweezers like move the pepperonis around and like it's called being a food stylist, and it's like a totally wild job. Yeah.
nice?
Um, this is the picture of the camera truck from my last just like pilot that I did. That was kind of like a military TV show, and it just kind of shows like the amount of gear that we have on a job. This, so these are all
Wait,
different
this is a
cars.
truck?
This is like looking from the back of like a truck.
Oh wow, it's huge. I thought this
Yeah.
was like a warehouse or something.
No, so this is like these are our camera carts. So this is like 3 levels, each of these ones on the side, and then most of them are just 2 levels. These are the tripod heads that like mount on the back of them, and like all of these are lens cases, and this is yeah. So
Wow.
this we had 4 full-time cameras on this show. It was like we had a lot of gear. We had a lot of sets of lenses and different things because we were doing a bunch of rigs, but just an idea of like the amount. And every job's kind of different. So it's like when you prep a job, you have to go get all the pieces and make sure they like work for like the thing that you're doing. So it's like it's kind of the same every time, but it's also like different every time depending on like what you're trying to achieve. But this is all for this job, which also involved us rigging a camera on the side of this helicopter so we had somebody in the helicopter and then the helicopter took off. So this camera was like hard mounted to shoot essentially like half of somebody's face and then also outside the helicopter. So I took a picture of that, which is
Whoa.
kind of like mounted up in here. And
Oh
then the
yeah, yeah.
grips, who are a whole other department, put up all these like rigging pieces. I don't deal with any and like safety it down. And there's like all kinds of like wrenches and they put extra straps on it. So even if this whole thing fell off the side of the, like this would be there. And
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of another angle of it. This is the video transmitter so that you can try to see it. Although once it flies up in the air, like at a certain point, you can't see it anymore. But anyway. Um, and then this is from that same project. There were just some like big tools on it, so were kind of cool. So this is like this like seat this where are they? Morocco or something like that. They like built this whole set. This is in
Wow.
Santa Clarita. And there's like a town square. These are like these giant cranes that have the front of this one is like white, so that it's like a bounce, just like reflecting light like back into the set. This is like a big bounce up here, reflecting light back into the set. This is what's called a techno crane, which it pivots and moves around like this, and there's a camera on the end of it, but it also telescopes. And then the head where the camera is on the end is in like a motorized head that somebody can control from down below. Um, yeah, it's just like lots of lots of big toys on that one, as people would say. This I thought was kind of cool. This is like this lighting setup for that same job where like this is like a whatever, like I don't even know how tall crane that they just like build this light softbox and like pick it up way in the sky because like the further away the light is, the more diffused it is, and it doesn't look like it's being lit at night. It looks like moonlight, but it's like a
Well,
pretty. They had to like
yeah.
build this for a whole day and then rig it up and then crane it over and like yeah, it's pretty crazy. Um, there's another picture of the same thing that I
Oh yeah,
built.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. And this is like we had to shoot a scene that was like on a roof. So this is a crane. The first part of it's a crane that just goes like this and like swings around. And then there's one of those techno cranes that I've like a smaller techno crane on that platform on top. It's like a crane on a crane that there's like 4 people operating in order to get the camera like up and moving like where you need it. I had never seen one of these before until this. I was like, this is like the most excessive, silly thing that I've seen. But it was like when we shot with it, I was like, okay, I guess this is what we needed to do to like achieve this. Um, and then I was gonna show this video, which is like not really a good video, but I helped my friend on a K-pop music video over the summer. Oh
Oh wow.
my gosh, it's gonna play the. So this is like this is the what is it? 6th Street Bridge. I don't know. They just finished it in LA. So behind all of these K-pop stars in Rise, if you're a K-pop fan, is like you can see the city, and then my friend Chris here is like operating like a handheld gimbal rig, and we had to shut down the we so sometimes when you have to shut down a street to shoot, you have what's called like what ITC, meaning there's cops there who like stop and let traffic go as opposed to closing down the whole street. So we would close it down, then we'd shoot, and then we'd like open it back up so that people could go through. And so this is you'll see this like woman like run out in the middle, and that's her essentially saying like somebody like broke the lockup. Like there's somebody like driving down the street right now that's like not supposed to be driving down the street. So
Yikes. Okay, yeah.
there.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Uh
Man, that's wild.
Yeah.
We're a few minutes out from losing you, and so yeah, Matthew, do you have any questions for Mel now that we've got her on?
Did you like think like when you were a kid, did you think this was something you would like go into, or did it just kind of happen?
No, it definitely just kind of happened. I mean, I didn't like it's funny knowing people out here now or like especially my boyfriend now like grew up in LA and like his dad worked in the film industry and like talking to people like that is so funny to me because like I didn't even know that this was like a job. Like I knew that people made movies obviously, but I didn't think about it as like a career in any kind of fashion before really before I like worked on that pilot or maybe like a couple of years before that, you know, or like a year or so before that. I kind of thought I was gonna be a photojournalist or like something like that, but yeah, definitely not at all. Yeah.
Um, and then like I guess what are the people like? Because if you're working in Hollywood, I have to guess that you're seeing like, you know, some very popular people. Is it like weird just seeing them walking down the street or eating a sandwich?
You know, I don't know, like I've never been like too much of a fangirl with anybody, so I don't know if it affects me less, but like I think you the more you are around people like that, it helps you to just be like, I don't know, these people are just people. And like all people, like some of them are cool and normal and they talk to the crew like they're people that they work with, which we are, and some people are fucking weird and rude and like but I think for the most part people are fine. Um yeah, I think if I've like recognized somebody before, it definitely can be like it feels like somebody like coming out of the movie and you're like, I didn't realize you were a real person, but yeah, at a certain point it's just like your coworkers, you know. Not that we're like hanging out on the weekends, but yeah, you're
Any
all there to sort of achieve the same thing.
This is sort of a
Yeah.
basic question, but anyone who has just kind of like charmed you or knocked your socks off, you're like, whoa, like X is a really cool person.
I did a movie with oh my gosh, no, I just totally forgot her name. Kristen Bell, who I think is like in the public eye has like a very good image. But she was like the most normal person ever. Kelly and I was talking about this too, where like there's people who are like totally professional, where they're like courteous to the crew, they're nice, they're I have like nothing, but they treat you like somebody that you're working with. And then there's people who like kind of like shoot the show with you and talk to you like they're your friend and remember other stuff. She was just like a very down to earth, like normal person. Yeah. And then also I did this show called Mrs. Davis. Um, that came out on Peacock like 2 years ago. And the star of that, this woman, Betty Gilpin, who she's in something called Nurse Jackie, I think. And she's like, I don't, yeah, she's in a couple different shows, but she was like, yeah, there's a couple people, maybe not like A-list people, but that have just been like super normal and funny and like a joy to work with. And it makes a big difference. Like when the people who are like the stars of the show are chill and cool, that energy kind of like
Oh, nice.
really like when that person is like uptight and easily upset, it like makes everybody else on edge and it like, you know what I mean? It's like that energy is like so I'm trying to think about that in terms of like my own department too, when I'm like organizing a department or like I mean, I guess that's just kind of like a good rule for like any job and anything is like yeah, you're like that energy like has a lot of effect on the experience that everybody else is having, whether you like think it does or not. So yeah.
Yeah. Matt, anything
Yeah.
else?
I just one more question. Are you
Yeah.
like like almost like a contractor, like you just work one job and then that's it, and then you have to find a next like another job, or do you have like a not like a 9 to 5, but like a
No, yeah, I'm a
consistent job?
no. So I'm like in the union, which is just like a requirement to work on union jobs out here. So that's how I get like my healthcare and benefits is like through that. But in terms of jobs, like it's all as soon as my job ends, like that's the last job that I have until I get another one. And most of my jobs are like W-2 jobs. So it's like I get hired by a company for essentially like a temporary job for like 3 months and then I like stop working with them. So that's definitely like a stressful part about the industry, especially now, like with the strikes and everything, is like there is no consistency and no guarantees and nothing. So if that's a thing that people want, I wouldn't recommend working in the film industry. But it also gives you a lot of freedom because you can kind of like if you can like work a lot all at once and then like take a longer time period off and essentially make your own schedule around like the work that's available and like all of those type of things. But there's definitely pros and cons to that. A lot of people like with families and stuff like that, it's not as like good of a setup. Like if you want to be home and go to your kids like t-ball practice every Tuesday at 5, like you're probably not gonna be able to do that. But I don't know. Yeah.
Oh man, epic. Wait, so just to tack on to Matthew's question, do you get
Yeah.
like a million W-2s then every year?
hmm
Oh
Well,
wow.
actually, as I do like more long-term shows, there's basically you get a W-2 from the payroll company, and there's like three main payroll
Oh,
companies that process union shows. So I get one from each of those. But then like this year, because of the strike and everything, I did so many like little commercials that I probably had like 8 W-2s or something like that. And then even
okay.
when I started earlier, when I was doing a lot of smaller jobs, a lot of those jobs were like 1099 jobs. So my taxes definitely became kind of complicated.
Oh right, yeah. You have to like make sure you do withholding on your own and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way for me to end this on a boring note. Let's talk about taxes to
Not
the
talking
person
about
who works in
taxes.
Hollywood. um, Matthew, any last statements before we
Yeah, yeah,
let
yeah.
Mel go?
No, I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Matthew, thank you for joining us live today. It
Yeah.
was awesome that it wasn't just Mel and I chatting to each other. Um, and Mel, thank you so much. In Matthew, in our class, and for whoever is watching this video, in the visiting artist module, there are links to Mel's Instagram and her IMDb page if you want to
Okay.
look her up or follow her or see what else. We didn't even have a chance to talk about Solidarity Snacks, but I think that is
Okay.
a huge thing. Do you have like a 10-second pitch on Solidarity?
Oh, sure. I like work with a mutual aid group that does mutual aid outreach in Skid Row in LA. And it kind of formed in 2020 between like a bunch of unemployed film workers. And we kind of use a lot of the organizational and like movement skills that we have from set to, yeah, do distributions every week. And we've kept it up.
For
Really.
folks who might not know what Skid Row is.
Oh, it's like I'd say like the epicenter of the homeless encampment in LA. Yeah. So we do like food and hygiene supplies distributions and things like that.
Yeah, incredible and a huge part of your life. And I didn't want to condense it into this, but I didn't want to leave it off
Okay.
either. So,
Thanks.
um, cool. Thank you so much, Mel. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Matthew, for joining us. And yeah, I'll talk to you later.